What started in 2002 with Lions of Lucerne continues 22 years later. New York Times bestselling author Brad Thor is about to release Shadow of Doubt, the 23rd thriller featuring his former Navy SEAL Scot Harvath. Fans can get their hands on the novel next Tuesday, August the 6th. And we're talking to Brad once again from his home. Brad, it is always good to see you again. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Oh, it's great to be back with you, John. Thanks for having me.
You start this book under kind of a worst case scenario. A Russian cargo plane is on the move, 2 fighter jets are escorting it, and no one in Washington knows where it's going. Where did the idea come from?
I'd say, my joke, and I've probably made it with you before, is that my ideas come after the second glass of wine or in the shower, because that's where I'm the most relaxed, and that seems to be when the creativity bubbles up. That opening scene is interesting because I added it almost when I was done reading the book. Because I went back, originally the chapter 1 was our first scene in the book, and I decided I wanted to do something else. There's 2 types of thriller writers. You've got guys that are known as plotters, guys and gals, writers that are known as plotters, or writers that are known as pantsers, that go by the seat of their pants. They don't outline. And I'm definitely a pantser. So it's one of the, I always laugh when people, to this day, I still get asked, do you write with a computer or do you do it longhand? Nelson DeMille is the only remaining thriller author that I know that actually longhands out his novels.
Wow. So
I actually do it on a computer because I'm constantly moving things around. But I needed a scene to open up the book with that I really wanted to grab people with something short, crisp, and really cinematic in the beginning. And that's where I got this idea that something had launched off a remote airbase in Russia, and our Eastern European allies had let us know about it, and the Pentagon freaks out because it makes no sense the direction the plane's heading, why it has a fighter escort, and so it sets off alarm bells at the Pentagon, and I was able to kind of string that throughout the book until the big finish at the end.
Well, you've had Harvath ordered into action. You've had him have his conscience bother him into getting into action. But this time you have something new, blackmail.
Yes.
It's kind of another way of getting Scot Harvath involved in one of your thrillers.
Yeah, it's so the challenge for me. So first of all, for anyone who's new to a Brad Thor novel, I do have Harvath come back. He's my James Bond. He comes back. John and I have been talking for, we're talking about decades of work here, and we've been talking together for years and years. But I tell people, John, that my books are like the James Bond movies. If you've never seen a Bond movie before and the new one is in the theaters, you can go see it. It doesn't matter that you haven't seen any of the previous ones. But I did something in a few books ago, and I left kind of a little thread not tied off. Some people noticed, some people didn't. And I wanted to bring that back in this book. And again, it doesn't matter if you've read any of the prior books, but I wanted Harvath to have done something that's a little bit morally questionable. And that's what the CIA uses to blackmail him into an absolutely morally questionable operation. So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place where he's done something that's not exactly good, but the CIA is asking him to go and do something that's not exactly good. And so being the pantser, when the muse grabs you, if you ignore the muse, John, if you turn your back on her, she will fly out of your office and you'll be lucky to see her again. And if she does come back, it'll be way past your deadline with your publisher and your editor hiring a hitman to come get the advance money back.
But the thing that you've done here is you've made him, he puts Solvay first. Even in even when he's confronted with that, he's like, my first is family.
It's to my fiance. Yeah, it's a family. Family comes first. So that for me was an interesting theme to explore. And I tell people that I'm positive that Jack Ryan was Clancy's alter ego. James Bond was Ian Fleming's alter ego. Same way Harvath is my alter ego. So I ask myself a lot of questions. My dad's no longer active Marine. My mom was a flight attendant for TWA in the 60s. And they were both wonderful, wonderful people and very serious about character and doing the right thing. That was the Midwestern upbringing I had. And so I like to put Harvath in these positions where I have to ask myself, what would I do? And if I don't know the answer right away, I know that's a great story because
Hmm.
there's some moral ambiguity there, which I think adds to all the action and intrigue and plot twists in the book.
We follow each other on social media. We've conversed by social media for several years now, but I saw a post you did over the past weekend where you called this, Shadow of Doubt, the hardest and most rewarding book that you've ever done. Why is that?
You know, a difficult thing for so the industry term for what I've got with Harvath is a franchise character, like James Bond, because he keeps coming back. So what's difficult for me as an author, the challenge is introducing something new about Harvath every single time. So it's something that prior readers haven't seen, but new readers will also find fascinating and will want to know more about. So that's a real challenge. And my parents raised me that even if you're a broom pusher, you be the best broom pusher there is. So with every book, I'm trying to raise the bar. Even if you're a longtime reader and you don't notice that the bar's only come up this much, I know it's come up. And that's the challenge I set for myself with each book, is to get better, to tell a better story each time I sit down and start a new book. So this one was really tough because I did some stuff, John, like in this book, you didn't really see the bad guys until the end.
Hmm.
So oftentimes in my book, you'll have a bad guy, and every X amount of chapters we'll drop back in and see things from the bad guy's point of view. He's picked a site where he's going to detonate a bomb. Then another
Right.
chapter we see he's assembling the bomb components. There was none of that this time. You actually saw three different storylines of three different sets of good guys trying to unravel this plot. So what's fun is for the reader, they're as much in the dark for most of the novel as my protagonist and the other good guys in Shadow of Doubt. And essentially what you have is you've got three different sets of good guys who all know something bad is barreling down on the world, and they're all in their own special way trying to unpack and figure out what it is. So you're really in the car racing along with these three wonderful good guys trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, you're in one car, one chapter, another car, another chapter,
Right.
and in another part of France in another chapter, and they all intersect there at the end, which I thought again was a brilliant piece of writing. I'm not going to give too much away here, but I did want to ask you. You give Harvath a chance at revenge at the end, and I don't think it's giving too much away to say he himself doesn't take it.
Right.
And is that the doubt in Shadow of Doubt here, that he's looking at himself more as a leader than the one that always has to carry it out?
So the doubt is reflected in each single storyline. So Harvath has doubt as to whether he can trust his own government, whether he can trust himself. Solvi, his fiance, who's a Norwegian intelligence officer, has doubt about whether she can trust the Russian defector that she's been saddled with debriefing. There's Brunel on the French DGSE, the French intelligence side
Right.
of things, that doesn't know if she can trust this man that she's working with, doesn't know if she can trust herself. So Shadow of Doubt is reflected in every single storyline. But with Harvath, there's been this long time thing with Harvath where the U.S. does not want Harvath going on these operations anymore. They think he's too valuable. They think it's time for Harvath to be less labor and more management, that it's up to Harvath now to help develop the next team, the next generation coming up to help do the nation's most dangerous business. So that scene that you're talking about really comes down to whether Harvath for years has thought the only reason I'm not taking a desk job is nobody can do what I do as well as I do. So that little thing you're referring to is him finally saying, maybe I can let go and let somebody do something this important.
Yeah, as soon as I came across that, I was like, okay, that's the big piece of doubt that I took away from it. But now hearing you explain some of that others, there's doubt all the way through it. One of the things I thought was cool is that I remember in Black Ice, you had a playlist that Harvath listened to in the chopper, which at the top of that book really took your attention. Here in Shadow, you bring up the Rolling Stones, you bring up
Yes.
some of the other bands that our generation grew up with, but that Harvath also recollects that has special meaning to him.
Yeah, it's kind of fun because I wrote about a part. So, one of my favorite things, John, when I write these thrillers is doing the research. And so I set Shadow of Doubt, a large chunk of it, as you know from reading it, in a particular part in the south, place in the south of France. And as I was doing my research, I realized that that's where the Rolling Stones actually recorded Exile on Main Street. And there were some great songs there are fabulous songs that come from that album. And so that for me, one of the greatest compliments I get paid is people say, Brad, I love to read your novels with my laptop open or my phone right there. So I can actually go Google stuff you're talking about in the books because I'm convinced you made it up. And then I go Google it and no, it's actually true. And that's part of the faction too. Like you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins. So I love to weave those Easter eggs throughout my books. And again, my job is to entertain you. So I want you to have toes in the sand, book in the hand. You can skim across the top of the waves and have a great thrill ride with one of my books. But if you want, there's little subtle things that are planted throughout the book that if you're paying attention, you can pick up on them. And I think no matter how you read it, you close one of my books, A, hopefully having had a great adventure, but B, maybe being a little bit smarter about what's going on in the world today.
And C, those of us who have been around can say, okay, there he is. He's coming back. He's given all of this, the longtime fans, that little thank you for being there. And the Rolling Stones happen to be that thank you in Shadow of Doubt. So we all appreciate that.
Good.
You had a big announcement earlier this year that Scot Harvath may soon come to the big screen. I've asked you about this for years upon years. Jack Carr got James Reese on the series, limited series, and so many others. But now the option is there for your character to now be on a different platform. That's got to be something that is just really energetic for you.
Yeah, listen, it's super, and it's funny because one of the people on my team said, it's very typical in Hollywood to have lots of false starts, to get options at studios and nothing gets made. And he said everything we've done up to this point is worth it for where we are now. So we have Steve Lightfoot, the writer of The Punisher, which was fantastic on Netflix. Those 2 seasons, it's over on Disney Plus now. Steve's awesome. Also did Shantaram, which is based on a book, which is on Apple TV Plus right now. Great series. If you haven't seen Shantaram, I highly recommend it. So Steve's our writer. We've got Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movies, as our director. And then we've got Howard Gordon, the force behind 24 and Homeland, as our executive producer, along with producing couple, the Reddicks, who had done 2 great Oscar-winning films, Black Klansman and Get Out. So we've got this A-plus list Hollywood team that's come together. We're at Sony, and we go out this fall to try to find a home for it. So we're going to be having meetings at Netflix and Apple and Amazon and Showtime and HBO and all that kind of fun stuff. But we're hoping by Christmas we will have a home for Harvath, and we'll know where he's going to appear in his series.
Well, I can't imagine anyone passing on the opportunity. Just knowing how Jack Carr's series went with James Reese and The Terminal List, there's an audience for the thriller come to a different platform, and obviously with all of the material for Scot Harvath, it's got to be something that would be appealing to a lot of folks. Those of us who have been with you from day one in Lions of Lucerne know the recurring characters, the Solveys, the Nicholases, the Gary Lawlers. You hint at something again in this book with one of those characters that one of us can see on down the line, especially with Nicholas. I mean, he drops a little bit of a bombshell in here, and you're like, no, don't, please don't do that. But I guess it's you just dropping that hint that something may happen in future books.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. Again, when the muse lands on my shoulder and tells me what to do, John, I listen to her. And it was your job as a thriller writer is when you look at a scene, you open your mind and you take the first 4 things that come to you that could happen in that scene and you throw them away. That's your job as a thriller writer. And then you start looking at 5, 6, and 7. Because if I can think of the first 4 things that should happen in a scene, so can the reader. And so my job is to constantly be surprising the reader. Robert Frost once said, no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't want to give it away either. And I was as stunned probably writing it as you were reading it. Yeah. Because it just came out of the blue, and I was like, I have to use that because nobody will see that coming.
Yep, you're right. I didn't. And I'm sure not any other fans will either. But again, it's that little seed that you plant so well in so many of these books. It might be 3, 4 books down the line. Because let's face it, Deadfall happened last year, but this one starts off, about a week or 10 days after that operation, and Harvath gets on a plane. I mean, it's a year has gone by in the calendar, but maybe a week or 10 days in your character's life.
Exactly, in that universe. So that for me is a lot of fun. And in fact, there's a character that Harvath goes to for help in this book that was originally introduced, probably I'm looking this way because I can see all my books lined up on my credenza. And it was probably over 10 years ago when Harvath had to escape a hotel in the south of France, and he hopped into this, $200 million supercar, and there was a woman in the passenger seat, and he raced off with this car because he was being chased, and she's back in this book. So it's kind of fun to do that, and I know that the longtime readers appreciate it, and I know that brand new readers, I explain in a sentence how Harvath knows this woman, and the new readers are fine. It doesn't shake them. It doesn't make them feel like they're missing out. But if you're a longtime reader, it's really fun because you go, wait, I got to go back and read that again, or yes, I remember that scene from 10 years ago. So that's kind of the fun thing, and that's the line I have to walk as an author with a recurring character is I have to keep everybody happy. My longtime loyal readers and my wonderful brand new readers.
Well, once again, Shadow of Doubt, Brad Thor's 23rd thriller featuring Scot Harvath will be available next Tuesday, August the 6th. And once again, Brad, you always say faction is what you write, where the real world ends and your world begins. Like I said, satisfaction is what your readers are going to get after they close the book, Shadow of Doubt. Congratulations, another great story. I always appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, John.